I walked into the house expecting the smell of cinnamon and turkey, but the oven was off. The table was set for two. And my husband was gone. Only Charles, his stepfather, sat in silence at the head of the table. He didn't stand. He just looked up and said, "You didn't get the message?" I blinked. The suitcase in my hand suddenly felt foolish. It was Thanksgiving. Our tradition, our time. And yet, there were only two chairs, only one glass poured. And no Evan. I asked, "Where is he?" Charles shifted, cleared his throat, then picked up his fork, as if I had interrupted something sacred, a meal that never started. He left. Yesterday. Said he needed time away. No apology. No explanation, there was no note. No text. No missed call. Just a cold room and an untouched pie on the counter, the one I made from scratch that morning before boarding a 3-hour flight. To be left out of my own holiday. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked under me, like the house itself didn't recognize my place anymore. The candles were lit. But they weren't mine. Everything felt rehearsed, except my shock. I looked at Charles again. His eyes didn't avoid me. They held something I couldn't name. Not shame. Not surprise. Almost like permission. As if I wasn't the first woman to walk into a script already written. As if my absence had been rehearsed. I asked one more time, "Did he really not tell you he was leaving?" Charles sipped his wine. Then answered without blinking, "He said you'd be strong enough to handle it." As if strength was the prize for being abandoned. I stood and walked to the bedroom. The bed was made. But half the closet was empty. Hangers. Twisted in silence. His cologne was gone. So was the leather duffel bag he only used when he didn't plan to explain himself. In the bathroom, his toothbrush was missing. The towel I folded on his side of the rack, untouched. The note I left on the mirror the week before, "Miss you already. Can't wait to be home." Still there. My handwriting, framed by his absence. Downstairs, Charles had begun eating. No invitation. No questions. I stared at the plate set for me. Roasted carrots. A slice of bread. Like a placeholder. I sat again. This time, without asking. Because I needed something. Not answers, but proof that I wasn't crazy. That I had shown up. That someone had noticed. Charles finally spoke. I told him it was cruel. But he said you'd turn it into strength. Like always. My throat tightened. Because cruelty dressed as respect still cuts the same. And strength doesn't cook a Thanksgiving alone. I picked up the fork. Took one bite. It was bland. Overcooked. Forgotten. Like the woman they thought would keep swallowing silence. We met at a non-profit gala for children's education in Boston. He wore a crisp blazer, I wore passion in my smile. I spoke about history programs in schools, he spoke about budgets. Our words connected, his finances grounded mine. He asked me out that night. I agreed because I believed in partnership that balanced heart and mind. I didn't know which side would tip. Our first years were full of laughter. He surprised me with museum dates. I surprised him with homemade lunches during long workdays. We were equal and engaged. I taught him family recipes, he taught me fiscal discipline. We built a home rooted in memories and spreadsheets. Together. We married in our 4th year. At a vineyard outside the city. We promised to support each other's dreams. To be present in both triumph and quiet. Vows to always be my anchor. I held his hands, he held mine. And I believed we both meant it. My job offered sabbaticals. He encouraged me to write a book on local history. He said I could do it, because I'm here. I started drafting chapters at my desk. He proofread them. He advised on tone. He celebrated every sentence. Then came his promotion. To CFO of that tech firm he'd been eyeing. He traveled more. We celebrated with rice cakes and red wine. I thought we were growing. But he began to arrive less. Homeless, despite the house. We welcomed our daughter a year later. He held her first. He kissed her tiny head. Publicly, our family looked complete. Privately, his apologetic departures became more frequent. He missed bedtime. He missed breakthroughs. I asked why. He said it was work pressure. I believed him. Until I realized how precisely his calendar avoided traditions, birthdays, holidays, teacher conferences. Always, that week is impossible. Even when I confirmed weeks in advance. Even with invites sent. My book neared publication. He helped secure literary contacts. He introduced me to agents. But when the deal closed, his name was credited first. As if I hadn't written 3/4 of the text. I told him I felt invisible. He replied, "It's just formatting." He stopped asking what I was working on. Stopped attending my author readings. Said the baby kept him awake. But I heard the silence, a password he didn't share. He didn't read my margins anymore. He gave them away instead. Dinner conversations shifted. Finance and strategy replaced feelings. I tried to redirect. He brushed me green. Said he was brain tired. I would have understood if he asked. He didn't doubt we planned Thanksgiving. Last year. I curated the menu: pumpkin soup, mashed potatoes, my apple pie. He said he'd join late. He said he had a dinner with Charles. I smiled, assuming family dinner. He never came. When Thanksgiving morning arrived without him, I believed it was a scheduling mistake. I trusted him to say sorry later. But that was where trust began to crack. The silence he left spoke louder than any excuse. And something shifted. He started turning off his phone more often. Not at night, but in the afternoons. During my daughter's first recital. During my book club signing. During my mother's minor surgery. He'd call hours later, casually. As if absence was routine. He spoke less during dinner. Not out of tiredness, but disinterest. I'd ask about his day. He'd answer in headlines. I'd share mine. He'd scroll. Sometimes he didn't even nod. I noticed the calendar started changing. Events would disappear. I'd ask why. He'd say, "Oh, must have been a sync error." But only mine went missing. Only my lectures. Only my launches. He didn't correct people when they called me a stay-at-home wife. Even in front of his colleagues. Even though I had 2 degrees, 3 published essays, and a child I was raising while writing a book. He smiled like that label suited him. I bit my tongue. Out of exhaustion. He spoke highly of Charles. Not warmly, strategically. Called him sharp, collected, efficient. Not kind. Not fatherly. I found it odd. Charles rarely spoke unless there was wine. Then he missed our daughter's birthday. Sent a gift through Amazon. Didn't FaceTime. Didn't text until midnight. The note said, "You're growing fast. Stay strong like your mom." I read it aloud. Then folded it in half. I found a receipt in his coat. Dinner for 2. The date? Our anniversary. The restaurant? One we planned to visit months prior. He said he forgot. Charles started calling. More. Not to talk to me. Just to check in on Evan. Even though we lived in the same city. He always ended calls with, "Make sure he's not too tired." Tired of what? I wondered. He stopped sleeping in our bed on Fridays. Said he had late meetings with the West Coast team. But his scent faded on his pillow. And the sheets stayed cold. Even in summer. I stopped asking. Silence replaced suspicion. One night, I heard our daughter say, "Why does Daddy always miss our special days?" I didn't know what to answer. Because I'd been wondering the same thing. I said, "He's working hard." But I knew the truth. He was working away from us. He stopped bringing home souvenirs from trips. He used to bring bookmarks for me, stuffed animals for our daughter. But the last 3 trips came back empty. Like we no longer lived in his memory. Only in his mailing address. Our mailbox started filling with finance magazines. Not addressed to Evan, but to Charles. I asked if he updated anything. He said, "Must have been a billing mistake." But I didn't believe in mistakes anymore. Just patterns. His wardrobe changed. New suits, more cologne. Shirts he didn't wear with me. I asked if he was changing offices. He said he was rebranding. I smiled, but inside, I was archiving. He missed our family photo shoot. Texted, "Sorry, running late. Start without me." We took the photo anyway. Me and our daughter on a blanket of autumn leaves. Later, I framed it. Left space on the right side empty. Where he was supposed to be. That was when I understood, he was editing me out quietly. Not with fights. But with erasure. And I realized, I had proof. I just hadn't opened the folder yet. I sat across from Charles in a room that wasn't mine anymore. He ate like nothing was wrong. The clink of his fork against the porcelain felt louder than thunder. I stared at my plate, untouched. And I realized, this meal was never for me. It was a performance. A message, served cold. I asked again, "He really didn't tell you I was coming?" Charles didn't look up. He said, "He figured you'd figure it out." I clenched the edge of the table. Because cruelty wears politeness well when it's dressed in tradition. And this Thanksgiving was staged without me. I walked through the house looking for signs. Anything. A coat left behind, a suitcase forgotten. But every room looked sanitized. Cleared of him. Except one detail, the photo of us on the nightstand. Still framed. I picked it up. The glass was cracked. I hadn't noticed it the week before. Charles said from behind me, he meant to throw that out. The words hit my back like ice. I set it down carefully, because I wouldn't shatter. Later that night, I found Evan's tablet. He forgot to log out. Or maybe he didn't care. The emails were there, to Charles. Not about work. But about me. He called me emotionally erratic. Said I was increasingly suspicious. Claimed I was making things difficult for our long-term plan. I paused. Our plan. Charles had replied, "She's starting to notice. Be careful." It felt unreal. Like I'd walked into a play halfway through, except I was the one being rewritten. Not just erased, but painted into a different version of myself. One where my presence was a problem. My instincts, a threat. I searched deeper. One folder labeled Transition Plan. Inside, files mapping accounts, house deeds, shared investments. All under Evan's name. With Charles as consultant. My name was there too. But only in one tab, Release Strategy. I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed. The same one where I once read him drafts of my book. Where he once told me our daughter's heartbeat sounded like home. And now, this room was papered with strategy for how to leave me without leaving a mess behind. Only I wasn't the mess downstairs. Charles was watching TV. Like nothing cracked upstairs. I stood in the doorway. He muted the sound. His eyes met mine. Not surprised. Not sorry. I asked, how long have you been helping him erase me? He said, long enough to know you'd survive. Then added, that's what he respects most about you. I nodded once. Because I understood. This wasn't about love. It was about control. I packed my bag slowly. Each motion deliberate. Not because I was weak. But because I was memorizing every detail. The plates. The silence. The way betrayal wore old flannel and poured wine like nothing cracked. I left the house without saying goodbye. The door closed without resistance. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because this wasn't the ending. It was the evidence. And I was just getting started. I drove in silence. The roads were empty. The kind of empty that echoes back your thoughts. Every mile felt like an accusation. Like I had missed something obvious. Like I was the one who forgot Thanksgiving, and not the woman they had written. Out. I didn't go home. I parked outside a library I used to love. It was closed. But I sat there anyway, staring at the building that once held my dreams between shelves and outlines. It still stood. I checked my phone. Still nothing from Evan. Not a text. Not a missed call. Just the last one I sent 2 days earlier, can't wait to see you. Pie's coming with me. It was unread. I opened my email instead. Searched for Charles. Searched for anything I'd ignored. And I saw it. 3 months ago. A forwarded message titled, Adjustments for Q4, Household Logistics. I never opened it. It had an attachment. A spreadsheet. My name was in it, barely. Not as a person. But as a category. Line item, relocation pending. Like I was furniture. I closed the email. Let the screen fade. And cried. Not for him. But for every night I held my breath, waiting for kindness. And got strategy instead. I sat in the car until the sun dipped. I let the sky dim without turning on the headlights. Because I needed the darkness to match what I felt. Grief is strange. It doesn't always look like sobbing. Sometimes, it's just not moving. At home, the lights were still on. Our daughter was with my sister for the weekend. She hadn't seen what I had. She didn't know he left again. But I couldn't let her learn it like I did. Not through absence. Not through erasure. I showered in silence. Took off the dress I wore for the holiday he forgot. Hung it back in the closet, not out of hope. But preservation. Because I would need this memory sharp when the time came. I lay in bed and listened. To nothing. The quiet where his breath used to be. But I didn't feel alone. I felt returned. To myself. To the part he tried to edit out. I started a new folder on my laptop. Labeled it, Thanksgiving Draft. Not for revenge. But for memory. Because if they were going to write a version of me, I would write the truth. Line by line. I began with what I remembered, his words, the spreadsheet, the missing cologne. The photo with the crack. Each paragraph, a stitch back to myself. Reclaiming. No fiction allowed. I printed 1 page. Hung it on my corkboard. Title, She Noticed Everything. Below it, a single line. Even when they thought she wasn't watching. I spread the printed page across the kitchen table. Under it, bank statements, shared account logs, Airbnb receipts. My name on none. But my money, flowing out. He and Charles had planned this. It wasn't omission, it was orchestration. And I was finally seeing the blueprint. I made one calm call. To our financial advisor. I asked for a full audit. No accusation. Just request. 10 years of transactions, everything they rerouted. She didn't hesitate. Because facts aren't embarrassing. Meanwhile, I emailed my lawyer. Subject line, Thanksgiving. Logistics document. Attached spreadsheets. Attached email chains between Evan and Charles. No commentary. Just evidence. She replied, let's talk strategy. Next step, homeowners association. I asked for property records. Found that Charles had been paying HOA fees, labeled as realtor services. But he wasn't. He never touched the place. He was laundering expenses through me. I then went to the library. Pulled files on Evan's company reimbursements. Found travel expenses coded as family, Midwest. When I confronted his accountant, he flinched. Said he'd correct the coding. I watched him run the updated printout. My name still absent. At our daughter's preschool pickup, I saw Charles again. He avoided my eyes. He always waved at the teacher. Never at me. That moment told me more than words ever could. One reprieve, I was still here. I compiled photos. Charles in our house. Evan with shelves of boxes. They were readying for relocation. A plan without me. I didn't call to clarify. I photographed. I archived. I wrote a letter to our daughter, tucked in my kitchen drawer. I'm writing this so you know your mom was never absent. I was just paused. Not erased. A reminder for her. And for me. My lawyer prepared a petition. Filed it that afternoon. Changes of ownership. Account lockouts. Temporary guardian designation. I didn't gloat. I structured. And submitted. Within days, I received notices. HOA. Banks. The court. All addressed to me. Restoring presence in places I funded. Fundamental. Evan called. His voice rattled. He said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I replied, "Only because you made it happen." He didn't argue. He just waited for me to stop, but I didn't. Because erasure isn't undone by apologies. It's undone by evidence. By structure. By legal presence. I printed the final notice from the court's registry. Stamped, temporary guardian granted. My chest tightened. Not with triumph, but with relief. Because the world had acknowledged me before I had to defend my existence. That night, I burned the bank slips. One by one. The flames consumed. The past. I watched shadows dance on the walls. My own light returned. And in the stillness, I whispered, "I'm here." The court hearing was brief. Evan didn't show up. But Charles did. He sat in the back, arms folded, eyes heavy. My lawyer handed over the documents. The judge barely blinked. Everything was in order. The property? Frozen under investigation. The accounts? Redirected. The car Evan bought? Leased in my name. Now retrieved. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming what they built with my silence. And I made sure each correction came with receipts. At our daughter's winter recital, I stood in the front row. She waved at me. There was no seat left for him. Not because I blocked him, but because he never RSVP'd. Absence, once weaponized, became his own erasure. I released a public post. A single paragraph. Thanksgiving reminded me that presence cannot be assumed. I'm no longer waiting to be included. I didn't tag him. Didn't mention Charles. But they knew. Everyone did. My inbox filled. Quiet messages from women who had been logistically relocated. One said, "I thought it was just me." I replied, "It never is." That became my mantra. Clarice, from the publishing firm, reached out. She'd seen the court filing. She offered me a column, Voices Restored. Monthly essays by women previously uncredited. I accepted. Not to vent. But to rebuild. Evan tried to send gifts. A photo book. A necklace I once admired. A note, I remember. I returned the package. No message. Because silence, too, has a return address. Charles attempted one last meeting. Requested coffee. Said, "We misunderstood each other." I wore black. Met him in public. Listened without smiling. And said, "You understood me. You just didn't expect me to act." I handed him an envelope. Inside, a copy of the spreadsheet. A photo of the cracked picture frame. And the custody filing. He opened it, then looked up. I said nothing. Stood. And left. That winter, the house changed. New locks. New rhythm. The echo of absence turned into breath. My daughter danced in socks through the hallway. No more muted holidays. Only space for those who stayed. People stopped asking about Evan. Because I stopped saying his name. He faded. Like a watermark on paper that was rewritten with permanent ink. My ink. I bought myself a ring. Not gold. Not silver. Onyx. Solid, quiet. Worn on my right hand. No inscription. Just wait. Every holiday since, I light one candle. Place one plate for myself. And fill it with what I want. Because I am no longer a placeholder at anyone else's table. Spring came without apology. The trees outside my window bloomed slowly, like healing. No sudden flourish. Just steady proof that things continue, even after the roots are shaken. I rearranged the living room. Not to forget him. But to take back the space he never filled. The photo wall now held new frames. Me and my daughter in the snow. My book cover. A blank space, on purpose. I returned to teaching. My lecture, Erasure and Resistance, the Women History Forgot. For the first time, I used my own story. Not to center pain, but to show structure. Because betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just a missing seat. My daughter turned 5. We held the party in the backyard. Balloons, cookies, finger paint everywhere. She said, "This year feels warm." And it did. Because the cold had left with him. I visited the library again. The one I sat outside in silence. This time, I went inside. Donated 5 copies of my book. Title, She Was Always Here. I didn't need it to be a bestseller. I just needed it shelved. Every Thursday, I write. No more hiding in footnotes. No more asking for space. I publish under my full name. Rachel Monroe. No hyphen. No shadows. I see women in cafes reading my columns. They don't recognize me. But I recognize them. The way they underline the quietest lines. The way they nod, like something they couldn't name. Finally has language. He still texts, sometimes. Always vague. Always late. Thinking of you. I don't block him. I don't respond. Because silence now belongs to me. My lawyer emailed last week. Final transfer confirmed. All assets now in my name. The spreadsheet has been closed. No edits pending. Just one line at the top, file owner, Arthur Monroe. I bought a ticket. One way. To a cabin near the lake I used to dream about. Not to disappear. But to draft something new. Alone. By choice. The morning I left, I locked the house. Not with grief. But with resolve. Because closure isn't always ceremony. Sometimes, it's just packing your own bag, with only what's yours. And finally enough room. I keep a new journal. First line, no one else writes this but me. Every word since has been unfiltered. Unreviewed. Unshared, until I say so. At night, I light one candle. The same scent as that Thanksgiving. But now it means something different. Not abandonment. Not betrayal. But illumination. The moment I chose myself.